When I got back from my school trip, my bedroom was gone. It had been turned into an art studio for my sister. She needs the space, my mom shrugged. Don't be selfish, my dad added. I didn't argue. I just handed over my house keys and left. 3 months later, my parents handed me a letter. They were suing me. Let me tell you what I thought would happen, and what actually did. I dragged my exhausted, travel-sick body through the front door, dropped my bag in the hallway, ready to say something snarky like, "Home, sweet, overpriced suburban home," and collapse face first onto my bed like a dramatic cartoon character. Maybe I'd even whine a little for effect. But instead, things went very differently. Let's rewind. I had just returned from a school trip. It wasn't some fancy school-funded excursion. I earned every penny for it myself. I saved for months. Birthday money, tutoring gigs, dog walking, selling handmade earrings online. Don't laugh, they were pretty cute. I worked for that trip like it was the Olympics, and I was proud of it. The trip was supposed to be fun, and mostly it was, but travel and I don't get along. I get motion sickness on buses, planes, boats. If it moves and carries people, I'll feel awful and regret being born. After 10.5 hours of jolting in a bus with spotty air conditioning, my back felt like a crumpled tower from a kid's game. My head was pounding, my legs swollen. The only thought keeping me going was the moment I'd take a shower and crawl into my bed. My old, creaky but reliably mine bed. And maybe I'd surprise my family with souvenirs. I didn't go overboard with the gifts, nothing extravagant. For my mom, a small carved bookmark, because she always says she wants to read more when things calm down. They never do. For my dad, a goofy keychain with a joke I knew he'd roll his eyes at. And for my sister, she's obsessed with art. A few weeks before the trip, she asked if I could grab something interesting for her, like local art supplies or materials. And I did. It wasn't easy. I had to skip part of a group activity, haggle with a grumpy street vendor, and lug the thing around in my bag for days. But I found a unique set of handmade charcoal pencils, each wrapped in local patterned paper. I pictured her eyes lighting up when she saw them. Maybe she'd even hug me, maybe say thanks, without her usual passive-aggressive tone. I was still clinging to that silly hope they'd notice my effort. But that didn't last long. I got home half-conscious, dragging my bag behind me like a body in a crime drama. The house was quiet. I walked in, kicked off my shoes. Something felt off. It smelled like paint, acrylic paint. Muffled music drifted from the upstairs hallway. My bag thudded against the first step. Then my mom poked her head out of the kitchen. "Oh, you're back," she said, as if I'd just run out for milk. No hug, no "how was the trip?" I nodded, trying to smile. The trip was good. I'm exhausted. I just want a shower and to sleep. She hesitated. "Yeah, about that. Your room? It's your sister's art studio now." I blinked, thinking I misheard. "Say that again?" "She needs the space," she repeated, shrugging like we were discussing cereal brands. I slowly climbed the stairs, my heart pounding, exhaustion forgotten. And there it was. The door to my room, my former room, was wide open. Everything had changed. My posters were gone, my bed was gone, my bookshelves were gone. The walls were now white, splattered with paint and covered in sketches. A new easel, a ring light, stacks of canvases, the ergonomic chair my sister always whined about. "Hey, careful, the floor's still drying," she tossed out, not even looking up. I just stood there. I didn't ask if she was joking, because clearly she wasn't. I backed away, went downstairs, stunned. My dad was on the couch, watching a wildlife documentary like it was a normal Tuesday. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Don't be selfish, okay? She's working on her portfolio. You're almost 18, right?" As if being almost 18 meant I didn't need a bed or basic respect. "Where's my stuff?" I asked. It was the only thing I could get out. My voice sounded thin. packed up in the garage. You can grab it whenever." I didn't say anything. I nodded, pulled my house keys from my pocket, the ones I'd had since I was 13, and set them on the kitchen counter. No scene, no yelling, no slamming doors. I just left. For a second, maybe two, there was silence. Then I heard my mom. "Where are you going? You're not 18 yet. Don't be dramatic." My dad added, barely turning his head, "Don't be dramatic." It wasn't drama, it was clarity. It's strange to think a life-altering moment should be loud, explosive. But it was quiet, like the absence of something that maybe was never there. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe I'd call B? She always said I could crash at her place if things got weird at home. Maybe I'd find a park bench and pretend I was the lead in an indie film. I just knew I wasn't going back. People often say, "You must have seen it coming," or "Didn't you notice the signs?" As if hindsight makes everything obvious. But the truth is, when you grow up in a family that ignores you softly, politely, strategically, you learn to gaslight yourself before anyone else does. It wasn't just about the room. It was the final straw, the spark that lit the fuse. The fire had been building for years. My sister and I are only 2 years apart. She's older in age, but younger in every other way. Not because she's immature, but because she was allowed to be fragile, supported, showered with praise and gentle attention. I'd been called independent since I was 5. At first, it felt like a compliment. "You're so grown up," they'd say. "So easy." But over time, it turned into something else. They'd forget to pick me up from school. I made my own dentist appointments, learned to cook because Mom was busy prepping my sister for art competitions, and Dad was always on the phone. The first time I truly felt the difference, I was maybe 8. We both entered a school art contest. I made a weird, chaotic collage from magazine scraps and old comics. It was quirky, even if it didn't win. My teacher said it was creative. I was thrilled and wanted to show it off at home. My sister painted a tree, just a tree with watercolor leaves and a bird. It was cute. She got second place. My parents brought her balloons, took her to a restaurant, bragged to everyone at church. When I showed my collage, my mom frowned. "It's a bit much, but you tried." I still hung it on my wall. That was just the beginning. When my sister wanted art lessons, they paid for expensive classes. When I asked to join a writing seminar, "It's on the other side of town, sweetie. Too hard to drive you with our schedule." When she broke the toaster, it was an accident. When I broke a plate, I was careless. When she forgot her lunch, Dad would drop everything to bring it to school. When I forgot mine, "You're old enough to pack your own food." And birthdays, hers were straight out of a magazine. Themed cakes, tons of friends. Mine, a last-minute supermarket cake and an aunt who'd text, "Oops, thought it was next week." I clung to the good moments. Dad absent-mindedly praising my grades, "Good job," before returning to his emails. Mom once buying me a book because she thought I'd like something quiet. They weren't monsters, just neglectful, selectively loving. The kind who say, "I love you," with words, but not with actions. Over time, I stopped asking, stopped sharing my wins. It didn't matter. Everything was always about her. By 16, I was a background character in my own family. I paid for my own phone, got jobs, worked after school, managed my schedule, my finances. Everything. I cleaned quietly, ate quietly, lived quietly, and they praised me for it. She's never any trouble, so low maintenance. What they meant was, she doesn't need us, so we don't have to try. My sister could cry over a broken pencil, and they'd buy her a new set within 2 days. Meanwhile, I once passed out from a fever in the bathroom, coming to an hour later. No one was home. Mom was at the store. Dad was at work. My sister? At art club. No one noticed I was gone. I didn't tell them. What's the point of making noise if no one listens? That's why losing my room hit so hard. Not because of the space or the bed. It was the final confirmation of what I'd known deep down. I was expendable. They didn't even text me while I was on the trip. Not once. Mom later said she didn't want to bother me. Dad joked he thought I needed a break from them. Funny how they always wrapped neglect in pretty packaging. We were giving you space. Sure, so much space they erased me. I tried to hold it together when I left. I really did. But a few blocks from B's house, I sat on the curb and broke. Not like a dramatic movie scene in The Notebook. A slow leak of grief I didn't realize I'd been holding. I didn't know what to do next. Finals were coming up. I had nowhere to sleep. My sister had an art studio, and I had a bag and a keychain souvenir she'd never open. I thought of my grandma. I hadn't seen her in a while. Not because I didn't want to, but because life was too loud, and visits to her always felt like stepping out of that noise. She lived in a modest nursing home across town, nothing fancy. My parents called it good enough. I decided I'd visit her soon, not expecting anything, just to see someone who remembered who I was before I got so tired. When you're sleeping on someone else's couch, everything feels temporary, even you. B's family was kind enough to let me stay for a couple of days. But I felt their tension, the forced smiles from her mom, awkward pauses when I walked into the kitchen, hints like, "Are you sure your parents are okay with this?" As if they cared. I wasn't expecting luxury. I just wanted to exist without being a burden. Finals were creeping up. I was running out of clean clothes, and every time someone offered help, shampoo, dinner leftovers, I felt myself shrinking, like a ghost in someone else's life. I was still a high schooler, but I didn't feel like one. I was somewhere in between, too old to ask for help, too young to disappear without issues. And the silence. Not a single text from my parents. No call. Not even, "Hey, are you alive?" That should have hurt more, but honestly, it didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how quietly it ached, like I was finally hearing what I'd ignored for years. I started avoiding people who asked questions. I told the school I was staying with distant relatives. Not entirely a lie. B's mom showed daily patience. I knew I couldn't stay with them long. My birthday was 10 days away. 10 days until I was legally an adult. 10 days to figure out what adult meant, what life without a home looked like. I went to the one person who always saw me, truly saw me, even when no one else cared. My grandma. She lived in a budget nursing home that smelled of boiled potatoes and old newspapers. But she liked it there. Or pretended to. Her room was tiny, with lace curtains and a knitted blanket she said was older than me. I didn't plan to say much, just sit, sip weak tea, chat about nothing. But as soon as I walked in, she looked at me and said, "What happened?" I tried to brush it off, saying I was finding myself. It didn't work. By the second cup of tea, I broke down. I told her everything. Not the polished version I gave B, but the real one. The studio, the couch, the boxes in the garage, my parents' silence, the souvenirs I brought back. And they didn't even ask if I made it home. I expected sympathy, but not what came next. My grandma sat still for a moment, then said, "Good." I blinked. "Good that you left. Now they can't pull you back." I didn't know how to respond, but she kept going. She opened her nightstand drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with a rubber band, slightly creased. "It's not money," she said before I could ask. "But it's what'll help you get on your feet." I stared. "What is it?" "Bank details, legal forms, a letter to my lawyer. I've been preparing this for a while." I hesitated. "Grandma, I don't want you giving up anything for me." She waved me off. "I'm not giving up. I'm giving. There's a difference." I didn't take the envelope, but its weight in her hand spoke for itself. It wasn't just help. It was a future she'd quietly built while everyone forgot she existed. That night, I opened the envelope. Not cash, but neatly folded documents, a list of savings accounts, a note from her lawyer, and on top, in her handwriting, a short line. I can't give you a home, but I can give you a way out. The next few days flew by. My grandma's lawyer confirmed everything was legit. She couldn't transfer the full amount until I turned 18, but she released preliminary funds. I found a studio apartment, tiny but mine. I signed a short-term lease, paid up front. The first 2 nights I slept on the floor, no mattress, but it was better than any bed I'd ever had. I visited my grandma every day after school. We filled out paperwork, ordered food, watched silly game shows, and laughed at the contestants' answers. She told me stories I'd never heard before, about her first love, singing in the church choir, the time she slapped a man who insulted her cooking. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. Looking back, I see the signs. The shadow on the horizon, the tightness in my chest every time I checked my phone, the tension I couldn't name. Back then, I thought I was just adjusting, figuring out who I was without a house full of people who didn't need me. I didn't realize the storm was already gathering, that everything would change again, not the way I hoped. They didn't call, didn't text. They knocked. It was Tuesday, early evening. I'd just gotten back from work, taken off my shoes, when I heard 3 sharp knocks on the door. Not friendly, I brought pastries knocks, the kind that already sound like accusations. I opened the door, and there they were. My mom was dressed like she was rushing to an important meeting, makeup too perfect, with that fake smile she used to seem reasonable. My dad stood stiffly, arms crossed, like I was a problem at a parent-teacher conference. "We need to talk," my mom said. "No hello, no how are you." I didn't invite them in, just stood in the doorway. "We know what you did," my dad said. It was striking how quickly they got to the point. No pretense, no attempt at warmth. "She's not well, dear," my mom added, her voice trembling, but not from sadness, from calculation. "She's been confused lately, not capable of making those kinds of decisions." I stared at her. "You're talking about Grandma?" "You took advantage of her," my dad said. "Manipulated her to get access to her finances." I laughed. A short, stunned laugh, like a cough. I didn't take anything. She gave it to me. She'd been planning it for months. "You think we'll believe that?" my mom snapped. I started to close the door. Then my dad pulled out a folded piece of paper, cream-colored, with a legal header. "See you in court." They filed a claim for financial elder abuse. That's what they called it. They alleged my grandma wasn't in her right mind, that she'd been coerced, that I'd isolated her from her real family and tricked her into signing over control of her accounts. And just like that, the life I was building trembled. It didn't collapse, didn't break, but it trembled, like a house when a train passes nearby. My grandma's lawyer reached out to me immediately. She was furious. She called it slander, laughably transparent. But we still had to file paperwork, make statements, arrange medical evaluations. It became real, not just family drama, court dates, case numbers, signatures. My grandma was livid. That same day, she marched into her doctor's office and demanded a full psychological evaluation. She passed every test with dry sarcasm and a memory sharper than mine. She handed the nursing home director a copy of the court papers and calmly asked him to be a witness. He agreed without hesitation. That evening, she wrote to me, "Let them come. I've been underestimated longer than you've been alive." I was scared. I knew how they could twist things, how easily they played the role of concerned parents. They'd done it before, at school, at church, with relatives. They had the tone, the look, the script, and people believed them. And I was just a kid who walked away. Moody, a problem child, the one who doesn't answer calls or show up to family dinners. They'd paint me as ungrateful, manipulative, money-hungry, but I didn't want money. I wanted a bed, a place, a life where I didn't feel punished for existing. The court case didn't last long. Their claim was flimsy, rushed, full of contradictions. My grandma's evaluation dismantled it. Her doctor confirmed she was fully competent and exceptionally aware. The nursing home staff backed her up. Their lawyer dropped the case a week before the hearing, saying they wouldn't cooperate. They tried to backtrack, pretend it was a misunderstanding, that they'd overreacted out of concern, that they wanted the best for Mom. But it was too late. Word had spread. Relatives started asking questions. One aunt wrote in a fury. Turns out, my parents had told everyone my grandma could barely remember her own name, that she was fading. No one bothered to check. Now they were checking, and it didn't look good for them. My grandma updated her legal documents again. This time, she named me her official medical proxy. If her health declined, I'd make the decisions. Not her daughter, not her son-in-law. I asked if she was sure. She said yes, without hesitation. "They don't get to decide how I leave this world," she said. They already decided how little I meant to them. A month passed. I focused on school, work, sleep, remembering how to breathe. I got accepted into a university program in another state with a full scholarship. It was a dream I didn't think I had the right to have. When I told my grandma, I expected her to hesitate, to ask me not to go, to say she needed me close. But she just smiled. "Time to move on?" I promised to visit every weekend. She rolled her eyes. "You better." We found her a new nursing home, closer to campus, safer, warmer. It had a garden, a therapy dog, live music on Wednesdays. I happily covered the cost difference. It felt like building something real, something mine. Years passed. I graduated university, found a job I loved, rented a better apartment, paid taxes, made grown-up phone calls. Every Sunday, I visited my grandma. Her money eventually ran out, but mine didn't. I took over the expenses without a second thought. It wasn't a burden, it was an honor. She lived longer than anyone expected, laughed louder than her age should have allowed. She told the nurses inappropriate jokes, gave me pep talks before interviews. She lived, and when she passed, it was quiet, peaceful, in her sleep. I held her hand until the end. She left a note, just one line. "You gave me a second life. I hope I gave you yours." I didn't invite my parents to the funeral, or my sister. I heard they're still together. My sister's art career flopped. Now she runs an art supply store downtown. They don't talk to most of the relatives. Sometimes I wonder if they think about me, about my grandma, about what they tried to take. But then I remind myself it doesn't matter. They had a chance to know me, to know her. They chose control over connection, image over truth, and we chose each other. That's my story. Looking back, I don't know what's more shocking. How far they went, or how long I waited for them to care. But in the end, I found something better than their approval. I found peace and someone who believed in me when no one else did. What do you think? Could they have ever treated me differently? Was I right to walk away? Let me know in the comments.